everyone, and welcome back to the Marketer of the Day podcast. We are here with Ben Krueger from CashflowPodcasting.com. And Ben is the founder and CEO of Cashflow Podcasting, and Ben is here dedicated to helping industry advocates just like you listening right now to start, launch, and grow world-class podcasts for your business. Now, Ben has collaborated on hundreds of podcasts since 2012. He's applied his podcast principles and service systems to help clients easily host shows that make a deep impact while reaching millions. Ben, glad to be talking to you.
This is going to be a lot of fun. I really enjoy talking podcasting shop. So excited to be here, and thanks for having me on.
Yeah, I'm glad to have you on, and it's always fun to involve new people in your business, right? It's to escape the bubble and have it not just be you. And with podcasting, you meet all kinds of interesting people. And I haven't really met any real meanies, right? I'm usually people that I come across, like they're real business owners. They know what they're talking about. It's almost like if someone has stepped up to the plate, if someone has made that choice to podcast and put themselves in front of that microphone, they've kind of, they're like not, they're not mean people, right? If someone has chosen to podcast, they're like a real business owner. They're taking it seriously. And it just seems like it's having that, like, there's that, I don't know, one level up compared to a lot of kind of the jokers out there. Do you think?
Yeah, I think what's interesting is I find podcasting is a really interesting medium in that it really is transparent towards someone's authenticity. Like, you're hearing their voice, you're hearing their tonality, how they talk to people, how they, think and consider and approach problems in the industry or talk about their topic. And what's interesting is you cannot fake caring, or like you can't fake being interested in the topic, really. And so I think, at least in terms of early adoption of podcasting, it really attracts those people who are passionate about their topic. They're passionate about, their industry and what they're doing. They are more kind of the go-giver types. And then the late adopters tend to be the ones who are a little bit more like, what's in it for me? I've got to make sure I'm stepping into podcasting as an opportunity to take. And I think that's where the meanies tend to lie. So I think you're right in that podcasting is a land of easy to connect with and converse with and be human with business owners, which is fantastic.
So we need to give and not so much take. And how do we tap into that? If there's some business owner out there listening and they say, I know that podcasting is something that I need to be doing, but I just haven't gotten started, I just haven't implemented. How do we get them on this podcasting train?
Yeah, so I think there's kind of a few pieces to this. Like podcasting as a strategy, where we've seen it work really well for businesses and actually driving tangible business results, is using the podcast as a way to create community around your brand, create evergreen content, be an evergreen resource for your audience, and essentially be a way for you to create intimate, deep, connected relationships with your audience. So if you've been thinking about podcasting, you're considering it, and first off, I'd like to say that anybody who's started a podcast has thought about it for a long time first. That's almost across the board how that tends to work out, because it's the thing that doesn't need to happen by the end of the week, or else you're not going to make rent. It's that thing that can it's a growth project. So it can be put on the back burner without feeling the pain too much. But what I've found that it comes down to is, if you are someone who legitimately loves to connect with other people, to hear other people's stories, to learn new insights about the industry, and you're one of those types of people who likes to share what you're discovering, what you're learning, what you're exploring with other people, and create and have community around that, whether you like going to conferences or you like, just talking to people one-on-one over a beer or coffee, that kind of thing, then podcasting as a medium has a lot of natural strengths that line up with things that you're already passionate about versus, let's say you're someone who is a naturally gifted writer. You don't feel super comfortable at, speaking or as a speaker. Then, obviously you can go different channels, different marketing mediums with that writing capability. So I think a big piece of podcasting is learning whether your natural capabilities and the things that get you excited align well with what podcasting is already really good at, and finding those synergies.
And when you're talking about all that, you're reminding me that my interest in podcasting and in my own podcast has kind of increased and decreased, and I'm sure that you've had similar times when you thought about like just giving up the whole podcast, or like you said, some people just think about having the podcast for so long. And I had a little bit of an aha just now as you were explaining that, because last night I was listening to this interview with Joe Rogan and Elon Musk, and there's like these viral clips where they're getting all
Great
crazy
talk.
talking
Yep.
about Neuralink and the Boring Company, and even just listening to that kind of got me excited about the podcasting again, and excited about jumping on this interview with you. And I just now was thinking about years ago, there was a similar time when I was just wondering, like, well, should I even be doing the podcast? Because as you said, it's not the highest priority thing. It's kind of a slow burn, long-term thing. And years ago, I was listening to the Comedy Bang Bang podcast, where they kind of do a lot of just, chit chat about all kinds of nonsense, but it's always entertaining. And it's like, whenever I'm kind of in that mode that you're talking about, of thinking about it for too long, wondering if I should even do it, like I find the podcasts that kind of have that creative, unique spark where things come alive, and I'm like, that's what it's all about, sharing those insights and being on the journey together with someone. So you're making a few light bulbs turn on in my head here.
That's great. Yeah. Cause I feel like, particularly in business, like new insights or connecting ideas, or like having the same idea, that you've heard of maybe 100 times before, that sinks in a new way and you have a new relationship with it. I feel like that's kind of like your gut speaking to you in a way, and like directing you over time versus, the super cerebral approach that's all data, all, metrics, all that kind of thing. And there isn't a right or wrong approach, but I think both have a lot of value, and based on kind of your personality and your work style, I think listening to that goes a long way. So, absolutely, like you mentioned, I definitely go through phases to where, the shininess of podcasting loses its vigor for, a couple of weeks as I'm working through other things or have other things on the brain. And I tend to reconnect with that when I hear that raw passion coming from somebody else.
And, but like we're talking about all these different, different podcasts out there, podcasts with all kinds of shows, all kinds of possibilities about what we could do. And a while ago, I can't remember who was posting about it, but there was some kind of somewhat famous marketer posting saying, well, the world doesn't need another podcast. You don't even need to bother with podcasting because it's so crowded. There's so many shows. And even seeing that made me a little bit angry. So, I mean, what do you think about that? If someone out there says, I know I need to have a podcast, it's a good idea, but there are so many shows, there's so many channels. Is there room for me? How do I be unique? Like, how do I even coexist in this crazy world?
Yeah, so there's a little paradigm shift that I like to share here because, a lot of people are told you should have a podcast, and yes, it's absolutely a valuable tool. I don't think anybody like has to or should in that forceful pushing kind of a way. Like if it's not a medium that resonates with you, then either it's not something you need to push on, or maybe not right now is the message to take. But fundamentally, what I have found in terms of where podcasting is strongest is as an audience nurture tool, as a way to create a relationship with an audience, build a tribe, build a community around your brand, and really deepen the trust and the relationship and the goodwill with those individuals who are kind of your most targeted, most, have the best potential to become your raving fans and clients and customers. So the way that I see this whole, are there too many podcasts out there? There are already tons of podcasts out there. Absolutely. And if you go out with the idea that I'm going to be the only podcast in my space, you're not. I'll just settle that issue right now. But if you go in with the mentality that I'm creating this podcast for my audience that already exists in my space, and I'm doing it with my own personality, with my own unique flair, and I'm legitimately coming to the table to add value and help the industry as a whole, help my clients and listeners and prospects and, the tribe around my space as a whole. That whole, grow the pie versus trying to cut out a slice for ourselves. That mentality really shines through in podcasting. And so, when you're going in with the mentality of creating depth of a relationship and adding value to your community, it doesn't matter if there's 20 other podcasts on the topic, because you are there specifically for your community. And then one nice side benefit of podcasting, and anybody who's listening to this, you can kind of judge by yourself. Is this the only marketing podcast you listen to? Is this the only business podcast you listen to? Of course not. If you're interested in marketing, you usually have a Rolodex of a couple of podcasts around that topic that you really like, that you really resonate with, and that you check in with. So just because there's, 3 other podcasts about, let's say, finance, financial management or preparing for retirement, if you are an immigrant family, let's say, I'm getting really specific here, but let's say there's already a couple of shows out there about that. That doesn't mean that people won't listen to your show as well, and you can't connect with them as well. So I'm a big believer in, start with the mentality of being there to serve and support and advocate for your audience and your tribe and your community and your crew. And you will, over time, then be able to attract and get shared out and referred out to other individuals who've never heard of you in the space through podcasting, through some of these other channels.
I like that a lot. You're saying that it's not zero sum. If you grow your audience, it does not take away from someone else's audience. And even the way you're explaining that, it reminds me of, like, with Facebook ads, there's like a lookalike audience, right? Where you have your own tribe, your own customers, and then if you run ads or you do things that benefit them or that they want to hear about, then there's all these other people that are kind of fit that same demographic that if you put your podcast out there, they will benefit from it as well. And there's been more than one marketer where I was kind of on the fence about staying subscribed to their list, or even just like clicking on their links, checking out their offers, even looking at their Facebook page, and I ended up becoming a subscriber to the podcast. And then even when I was off the email list for a while, I still listened to the podcast, and eventually something in the podcast interested me enough to go and sign back up. And then I've never quit the email list ever since. So in a way, it's like I would have left forever, but then now the relationship is even more reinforced, and I kind of had that marketer in my ear for all those weeks or months when maybe I just didn't feel like taking in the information from an email medium. Maybe I just needed to switch and go for some walks and go for more of that long form. And so, yeah, we've been talking a lot about these reasons why people need a podcast and think differently about having a podcast. Serve your existing audience and give them what you think that they need to hear about. And you have these 8 podcast principles, and I'm not sure if we have time to get through all of them, but can you explain to us what these podcast principles are and maybe unpack 1 or 2 of them if you think there are some ones that apply especially today?
Yeah, I love this because, I've been working in podcasting since 2013, which at least in terms of podcasting years is a little bit of a while. And what I kind of realized over time was there's tons and tons of different strategies people are using, and different tactics. And what, in working on them, trying to work with clients to help them figure out the right strategies for them and their situations, it kind of dawned on me at a point that there's certain principles that are kind of beneath these strategies. So if you follow the principles, then you can kind of plug and play the strategies to make a podcast as effective as possible, essentially. And the strategies are going to be different and shift and evolve, but the principles stay the same, and the principles are consistent. So that's the idea behind the principles, and that's kind of where I really like to think is on the strategy and foundational level, because then it gives you a strong base to build on. So just to kind of kick it off, and I've organized them in sequence that makes sense in terms of A, when you are initially planning a podcast, or B, if you have a podcast and you're looking to do a little bit of a facelift revitalization, make sure that it is as effective as possible. You want to start at the beginning of these principles and work through them, because that's gonna kind of get you the best result. So principle number one, this is kind of across the board, and it's interesting how much I see folks getting started in podcasting or having a podcast for a year plus without ever even looking at this, is objective, and having a crystal clear idea of what am I trying to do with the podcast? What impact am I trying to have for folks? Whether that's yourself, your business, your interview guests, your listeners. So starting with a crystal clear objective of what you're trying to do with the podcast. So fundamentally what we found is the highest objective, or the most effective objective of podcasting, is when it super aligns with your company's brand, mission, what you guys are there to do. And part of that is creating, and I'm kind of coming back to the same piece of deep, intimate, trusting, advising relationships with your audience, with your industry. So a great example of this, a client of ours, Jen Hemphill, who has a couple podcasts now, Her Money Matters and Her Dinero Matters. Her show, she got started, this is a little while back, with the objective of helping women change their mindset around money to actually help them also feel more confident, more wealthy, more empowered about their finances and about themselves. And so having that kind of a mission-driven objective that aligns with your overall company and overall brand, when you're there to serve, you're there to advocate, you're there to support, those are the types of shows that grow very naturally, that really connect and resonate with listeners, and that kind of set you up for long-term success.
Well, fantastic. And I've had Jen Hemphill on the show, and what you're making me, so she gets around, right? In a good way.
Hell yeah.
But
yeah.
what you're making me think of is like with this, like as that relates to me with the podcasting, like it's really easy to get stuck in the bubble and to not network and to just kind of hunker down and, work on another PDF file, work on another product. And the people that are really making it in any business, but especially internet marketing, are the people that have joint ventures, that have affiliates, that network. And for me, like the podcasting is a great networking tool, and kind of the shtick, the theme of this show of Marketer of the Day is that anyone is a marketer. And we have, sometimes I've had someone on who goes to prisons and does some kind of art drawing, sketching therapy, and there's still marketing insights to be had about them, and there's still an interesting story and insights. And so, and you make a lot of sense here that you have this objective, you know what the goal is, you know what the podcast will do for you, so that way you're not just puttering around, that way you're not just pursuing it because it's the flavor of the day. You're actually, you
Yeah.
know what it will do for you in your business, so you have a reason to keep going and make it better.
Absolutely, absolutely. And then, the nice part about these first couple of principles is once you get them figured out, they become the North Star guiding lights of all the decisions that you make around the podcast and around what you do with the show. So, we're number one with principle number one. It's, what's the objective? What are we trying to achieve? Principle number two is essentially getting crystal clear about who your audience is. And I like to think of the question of essentially what one single problem do you help one specific group of people solve? And that really helps dial in clarity around an audience. And so there's a lot of pushback and a lot of resistance around this because folks don't want to alienate. They don't want to, restrict the potential size of their audience. And in doing so, what I see a lot of times is that their message really just doesn't resonate with anyone or doesn't, connect on a deep level. And so they may have the potential to be listened to by a broader audience. But a lot of times the audience isn't quite as engaged and doesn't identify with that podcast or with that community very well. And B, just if they come across it or if they hear about it online, it doesn't stick out to them as something that is for them. So like a great example of this is a client of ours, David Phelps, who runs a podcast called The Dentist Freedom Blueprint. And it's all about helping dental practice owners create long-term wealth through real estate investing. So, it's incredibly specific, and you can kind of hear how far he's gone in the specificity piece. But, if you're a dental practice owner and you are wanting to figure out, like, do I keep my practice? Do I sell it? How do I actually, take what I've created and actually build wealth out of it, and kind of get off the treadmill of running this practice. So that's a great example. Katrina Ubell is another one, which is really fun. Her show, Weight Loss for Busy Physicians, is for women physicians who, have struggled with weight loss for a long time. And so you can kind of picture, if you are a woman who has struggled with weight loss, you're a physician, like you come across something like that, it sounds so specific and uniquely created to you that it immediately resonates. And then on the flip side, we found these types of shows grow in a very grassroots referral person-to-person style, where it's essentially a highly targeted audience because, let's say you are a woman who's, wanting to lose weight or feel better about her body as a medical practitioner. You are likely to know women who are medical practitioners. Some of them may be also interested in losing weight or changing their relationship with their body. And so what this becomes then is a super referable way for people to find out about you, to learn about your message in a zero risk environment for them. They're not getting directly connected with you where there might be a sales call or there's some expectation of them. They can remain anonymous. They can learn about you. They can dive into your content, learn as much as they want, become a part of kind of that community and build a relationship with you as the host, without any risk to them whatsoever. And so that's where kind of dialing in these first two pieces lets you then plan out and figure out all of the other elements of a podcast. If you know who your client or who your audience is, you know what your objective is, then you can start thinking, do I do interviews or solo episodes? How long should my episodes be? How often should I release new content? So all of those things become so much easier to answer once we've dialed in these first two principles.
I like it. Yeah, it's like because you've made some of those decisions early, then it closes a lot of the other doors. So you're not saying, I have a million choices to make. Now it's down to just 10 or 20 there. And this way of thinking makes a lot of sense, where you choose a specific person and you solve that specific problem, because then it's like it's easy for that. It seems like it would be easy for that prospect to imagine themselves as a coaching client or a purchaser of that course, right? If you know in and out about what a dentist needs to know about making money from their real estate, then chances are maybe you have a customer like that or you have a client like that already, and then it seems like that would make it easier to create the content, to create the interesting content. You're solving real problems for these people instead of just thinking, well, what topic should I talk about today? You're solving real problems for them. And then I love that part that you said there of, let's say a dentist out there listens to that. They probably have another dentist friend and they can recommend that in that grassroots word of mouth way, and then it can grow on its own. And we're starting to run out of time here, and we probably only have time for one more principle or so. But one thing, and I'm not sure if I'm asking one question here or two questions here, but how do you make sure that there's enough meat on the bone? Like if you make that podcast super dialed in, super specific, how do you know that you're going to have enough content for 50 episodes down the road, 100 episodes down the road about that dentist making money from the real estate? Or is that just something to not worry about and it'll work itself out later?
Yeah, so this is a great question because yes, some topics and industries lend themselves well to the medium of podcasting, and some don't. So, what I found the delineation is if it is a topic or an area of interest where people want to develop, grow, improve, continuously learn about, then it's going to be well suited for podcasting. So marketing is a great example. Business of any kind, any personal journey or transformation. What does not make a great topic is something that you don't have deep interest in and you just want a solution for. So a great example would be a podcast about dentistry in terms of like actual, dental health and dental procedures and that kind of thing. If you are a dentist and you're trying to do a podcast about dentistry for people who might come in and use your dentistry services, people don't generally care about dentistry or how it works or, any of that kind of stuff. They want the solution, and then they want to move on. Whereas let's say if you were a dentist and you work particularly with families or families with young children, let's say, then you could do a podcast around family health or, essentially having, something along the lines where there is a continuation of growth learning and you want someone wanting to do better or be more involved. So, whether that's overall like family health, family connection, and then dentistry becomes a part of that. So that if you are in a topic area where people want to continually learn and grow and improve, then you pretty much can never run out of topics to talk about.
And that is really powerful right there. I hope that people listening get that whole idea of transformation versus solution. That right there, that kind of puts a definition on something that I think a lot of us, including me, have been trying to explain or wrap our heads around, because there's always that kind of thinking of, well, do I want to put out a $7 ebook that teaches people how to treat their back pain? Well, fine, but then it's one and done, right? Then once their back pain is treated, that's it. If you have a podcast about how to treat your back pain, well, let's hope that someone doesn't have to listen to 35 episodes and they're still working on this ongoing problem of treating their back pain. Hopefully it's just done. But then if there's the kind of wider universe, the transformation of, well, you had back pain maybe because maybe you're overweight or had diabetes or we're getting older in the years, and it's a podcast where it's still about that specific audience, but then there's the kind of an overall solution and the, like you said, the always learning, where it's a continual growth and it's not just solving that one problem, but now there's this whole other universe of other things to solve. Getting in better shape, improving your diet, exercising, running. There's more to go, and you can just go on forever and ever instead of just that one single solution. I mean, that is some pretty dang simple but also powerful stuff. And as we're winding down, wrapping up here, is there anything that you wish you'd known? You said you've been at this since 2013 as far as the podcasting at least. If you had a time machine, you can go back way back then and prevent yourself from making some kind of a huge podcasting mistake, or maybe still make the mistake but give yourself some kind of advice. What do you wish you'd known about podcasting way back when that we all need to know today?
Ooh. I think the best piece here is it's a lot like the Chinese proverb about planting a tree. You know, the when's the best time to plant a tree is like 20, 30 years ago, but when's the second best time? Today. And podcasting, I've absolutely seen is a momentum and it's a momentum process, and it's a long-term strategy. It's not an overnight thing. It's not, the flash in the pan, release it, and by tomorrow you'll be crushing it generally. It's this piece that is built and works best as a cornerstone of your ongoing brand and as your ongoing way of relating to building community and connecting with your audience. So I think if there was one thing that I wish that I had like pounded into my own head and the head of my clients back then, was this concept that podcasting as a medium is not a take a swing and see what happens. It's a commit to it for 6 months to a year to give it a real shot, because that longer-term approach is going to be what wins out. And I think generally speaking, that is also what who tends to become real leaders in spaces is the ones who go into a topic, an area, an industry with the intention of still being there, still leading, still contributing 5 years, 10 years down the line.
I love it. It's great advice. If people out there listening, if they want to make this podcasting thing something long-term, a journey, a habit, then for me hearing that's reassuring that it doesn't have to happen overnight, because then you can figure it out as you go along. You can make those couple of easy, maybe imperfect episodes and see where it goes and see how it grows along with you and your business. And people out there, they need help with their podcast. They need some of that extra motivation. So if people listening need that extra boost from you, where should they go after listening to our conversation? What kind of websites should they be going to? And what should they do once they get there?
Yeah. So there's, and you probably know this as a listener, there's tons of resources out there around podcasting. There's tons of blogs, tons of different things. I'm a big believer in follow one approach that makes sense to you and ignore everything else, at least to get started and get things rolling. And then you can kind of pull parts from other people's approaches. But when you start and you're trying to take a little bit from here and a little bit from there and a little bit from there and optimize right from the very get-go by mixing 6 different approaches, it really doesn't work, and it tends to lead to paralysis by analysis. So a lot of the approach that we've put together, including the 8 principles, we have tons of free content, including a book over at thepodcastprinciples.com. So what I've shared so far resonates and makes sense and kind of lines up with how you would want to use podcasting, or you're a podcaster and you want to use your show more in the ways that we've been talking about. That's going to be a great resource for you to check out and a great place to kind of get started and understand the journey and even kind of rate your own podcast and your own podcast idea based on how well it lines up with these podcast principles that are, in alignment with other successful business podcasts. So that is kind of my number one spot for sending people. But I'm a big believer in, if my approach doesn't resonate with folks, find somebody who does and stick with their thing and don't worry about all the other info.
Fantastic. I love it. Find some way to get to where you need to go. You've been thinking about podcasting all this time. Even if one particular way of going about it doesn't make sense, don't lose sight of that goal. And there's even some backdoor advice you put in there for us of don't try to optimize right out of the get-go. I love that. And I've seen people do that, right? I've seen people have that analysis paralysis, have the perfectionism, have the fear, and think that they need to grab all these things and have all the stars align at the beginning. And it seems like a really easy recipe to stress yourself out and overwork yourself and just do all these things and think, man, that podcasting thing, that was so much work even getting one episode out because I had to make sure to have the music and all these things scripted and all these graphics and all these procedures in place. And you think, well, why didn't they just do it imperfectly the first time, and as their podcast grows, as they put the episodes out, then they figure out more of the traffic and the content and all the things that need to be figured out as they're going along in the process, and that way they don't have to get just hit with that tidal wave of all those problems at once. They can kind of drip it out over time as the podcast goes. So even some extra bonus tips there, but everyone can and should go to thepodcastprinciples.com. You made it this long listening to this podcast interview. Ben and I know that you have this podcasting passion, and like Ben said, whether you're thinking about your podcast or maybe your podcast is up and running and it could be better, or maybe even you tried podcasting a while ago but for whatever reason you burnt out on it, well, now is the time to get some fresh energy and focus and inspiration about it. Go right now to thepodcastprinciples.com. You'll be glad you did. And thanks, Ben, for stopping by and for dropping so many truckloads of Yoda-style philosophy on us. It made me think I might have to listen to this episode 2 or 3 more times now.
I like that. Truckloads of Yoda-style philosophy. I might steal that and start using that. This is great. But yeah, thank you so much for having me on. This is great. I love talking about this stuff and really great to connect.
Well, glad to connect with you, and you feel free to steal that, trademark it, and we will see everyone at thepodcastprinciples.com.